So we're raising the alarms of just, hey, you can't just put out these targets and then expect everything to come into line. You have to be working with reality.
George O'Connor joins me now. He is the Director of Communications for OOIDA. George, how are you doing today?
Doing all right, Ashley. How are you?
I'm doing well. So today we are talking about electric vehicles, specifically electric trucks. Now, OOIDA recently posted a page on the Fighting for Truckers website that details some facts, information, and resources on what's currently going on. I want to begin with that. What is currently going on?
Sure. So let's take a step back real quick and how we got here. So the EPA went through a rulemaking process called the Phase 3 Greenhouse Gas Emission Standard for heavy-duty vehicles. So they released their final rule in March of this year that would require 25% of new heavy trucks sold in the United States to be all electric by 2032. So it might seem like a little far off time frame, but as anyone who's probably watching or listening to this, it's really not if you're trying to plan a business or if you're familiar with the manufacturing process for any of these large vehicles. So that final rule came through in March. OOIDA has been vehemently against it all throughout the process, lodged comments. So we thank all of our members and non-members who also maybe have filed comments with the EPA raising these concerns. But as is the case sometimes with the EPA, they didn't listen to the truckers. So they went through with this final rule, and it's on the books now. So the next procedural step is Congress getting involved with a Congressional Review Act resolution. We don't necessarily need to go into the nitty-gritty of legislative and parliamentary procedure here, but big picture is that if these resolutions that have been introduced in the House and the Senate go through, they could repeal the regulation ultimately. So what we're doing now is encouraging folks to go to fightingfortruckers.com on this page that we have recently launched. And what we would say is accurately titled the EPA assault on truckers, because that's how we perceive it, and that's what our members perceive as well. So what you'll find here is some top line statistics about what the rule actually is. Again, 25% of new heavy duty trucks across the United States by 2032 must be all electric. So we're talking under 10 years for a massive transportation or transformation of the supply chain. So what does that mean for small business truckers who might not be able to scale a large fleet and come in line with these regulations? Well, the cost differential between a diesel and an electric truck, we're talking the difference between about $180,000 on average to $400,000 for an EV truck. So that's just the cost piece of this. Then you talk about the operational issues. Well, you probably fill your diesel engine in about 15, 20 minutes, probably under a half hour, right? Well, you're looking at overnight charging for these EV trucks. So up to 10 hours, let alone the charging infrastructure that, as is the case with even on the passenger vehicle EV charging, it's been a bit of a disaster in its rollout. So the idea that we're going to have this massive charging network as well as adoption of these vehicles is not likely. So we're raising the alarms of just, hey, you can't just put out these targets and then expect everything to come into line. You have to be working with reality. So what we're encouraging folks to do is contact their members of Congress to tell them to support these resolutions that I referenced that are both in the House and the Senate. HJ Res 133 is from Representative Fulcher. He's from Idaho. And SJ Res 74 is a resolution from Senator Sullivan from Alaska. Now, their constituents hopefully have already been engaging with them on this. And certainly if you hear from your constituents, from your voters, that's why you want to be the face of this legislation and get involved. But if you're a trucker and if anything I said previously has concerned you of holy cow, what are they thinking at the EPA? You need to contact your representatives and tell them to support the legislation to ensure that it gets a vote on the floor. We can get this stuff going. So fightingfortruckers.com, this is under the trucking policy page, and it's EPA assault on truckers.
Has anyone in government addressed those concerns of the lack of charging, the cost? Has anyone talked about that?
Well, what they'll do is they'll come the justification, the economic justification from EPA, because we've lodged these concerns with the EPA and told them, like, look, the math here does not add up. And they can torture their data till the cows come home, and that seems to be what they've done, because they say, well, if you squint really closely and all of these things align, then we can get to these target points. But I mean, it's quite frankly some bureaucrats looking at spreadsheets, not people on the ground, truckers that are actually dealing with this equipment and know the limitations of some of these EV trucks. Because we've talked to folks about these concerns, and to a point on the grid and on charging infrastructure, there was a trucking company in Joliet, Illinois. They wanted to convert their fleet to these EV trucks, 30 trucks. They had this plan. They wanted to do the right thing, get ahead of technology, or whatever their justification may have been. So they went through it. They started going through the process, and they were contacted by the local utility company and said, the local utility company told them, you guys can't do this. And they naturally asked why. Well, because the electric draw on the grid for 30 EV trucks is going to be greater than the draw on the grid for the entire city of Joliet, Illinois. So feasibility, these kinds of things, we can bring them to the attention of the regulators, but sometimes they have their own initiatives that they need to go through, and quite frankly, they haven't listened. So we're working with Congress to make sure that they do listen.
What do you say to a truck driver who, for the reasons that they should care about this? Say you've got somebody who's like, well, I've got my truck. I'll pour as much money into it that I need to keep this diesel going. What do you say to them?
I'd say that's probably a good thing to do at this point, because this is these regulations are on trucks sold. So as we also say, when it comes to environmental issues, the diesel engine has gotten incredibly clean over the last number of years. I mean, these are not smog belching engines from the 1980s that sometimes show up on environmental messaging documents. The trucks have gotten significantly cleaner. Emissions have gone down over the years, and this is really a bridge too far of feasibility. So, would obviously stay in compliance with whatever the federal regulations are. But from a business, I mean, we're not here to advise on business practices, but we'll allow the free market and participants in the free market to do the math.
Does the OOIDA think this could have kind of the opposite effect of what they're hoping for, as far as people keeping older trucks on the road and pouring more money into them because they don't want to shell out $400,000, and understandably so?
Very well could be the case. It's, as I mentioned early on in this conversation, the larger fleets are able to purchase at scale and come into compliance more easily than if you're a mom and pop truck operation. You own maybe 1-2 trucks under 10. $400,000 on a truck is not going to be feasible. It's really not. So we'd say probably extend the lifetime of your diesel engine as much as possible, and we'll leave it to you to do the math and look at your balance sheet, look at your operating costs, and Do the math. It's a free market.
And you touched on this a little bit. What has OOIDA done in the fight against this?
Right. So we've participated in the comment period. We've tried to make our voice heard. We've organized with other organizations to raise the issue, at least awareness among legislators, regulators. But again, if the EPA has sort of a top-down approach and doesn't listen to industry, and they just kind of go through and put a regulation out there and say, well, you guys figure it out. We can't make the regulation ourselves. We can make our voice heard. And I would encourage everyone who's watching or listening to this to go onto fightingfortruckers.com and contact the other branch of government, which is Congress, and get them involved, because there are solutions on the table to fight back against this.
Now, also on that page, we have a clip of Louis Pugh, who's OOIDA's executive vice president, talking to Fox Business about the emissions rule for heavy-duty trucks. How often is OOIDA called upon to talk about this topic?
Right. So we're actually seen as a leader on fighting against this this regulation, and a lot of I would put it this way: any trucking issue that negatively affects our members, we're going to be the leader on. We're going to be forward leaning. We're going to be taking initiative. We're going to be on the Fox shows. We're going to be on any media outlet that is willing to listen to us and hear our concerns. We're going to be out there.
And how important is it, for some who may be listening to this and thinking, I've never contacted a lawmaker before, I don't know how to do that. Explain to me the process that Fighting for Truckers makes it very easy to do.
We make it super simple. As Louis mentions quite frequently when he talks about fightingfortruckers.com, it's easier to go on this website and send a letter, an email to your representative than it is to go on social media and complain. So we would encourage taking that energy and putting it in a productive way of getting in touch with lawmakers, because it actually does have an effect. The more lawmakers hear from their constituents about these issues, the more likely they're going to jump on as co-sponsors. They're going to be talking about it in their communities. It's going to be, because not every lawmaker is a trucking expert. Not every lawmaker is a transportation expert. So if they're not hearing from us, if they're not hearing from their constituents, they might not be aware of these issues, as crazy as it sounds. So what we'd encourage folks to do is go on fightingfortruckers.com. On this page that I mentioned, the EPA assault on truckers, on the right side, just need to essentially put your zip code in, your email address, and you're off and running to make sure that you're sending this. You can customize your message to your member of Congress, tell them how this affects your business, would affect your business, because that actually goes a little further when persuading lawmakers. So we'd encourage you to do that. And for any of our main policy issues, there's going to be a page for that. And particularly if there's a legislative component or a regulatory component that allows for public input, there's going to be a way that we make it super simple for you to make your voice heard with your member of Congress or with the appropriate regulator. So we've got stuff on speed limiters, we've got stuff on parking, we've got stuff on overtime pay, minimum insurance levels that we're fighting against, broker fraud, restroom access, these really top of the line issues that we hear from our members about all the time. We're working on it in Congress too. We're working on it, working with the administration at times. But we need your help. This is a grassroots effort, and we need everyone involved.
All right, George, thank you so much.
Hey, sure thing, Ashley.